Welcome along everybody, Lucas Rogers from the Rogers Property Group. Just a quick catch up with everybody to talk about a couple of things that have come up in recent weeks. First of all, we've had an interest rate increase of 0.25%. It's not a huge amount. Is it going to make much difference to the overall property market? No, I don't think so. It really doesn't adjust people's repayments much, so I don't think that's having a big effect. Might slow a few people up, which I think is a good thing for the market. But the other big change we've had in the last few days is we've had a change of federal government, which is quite a big thing. We've gone from Liberals who have been running the country for almost a decade now to a change in Labor. And I suppose the big question for a lot of people is well, what sort of effect is that going to have on the property market? Is it a good time to invest now? Should I be holding off? Whatever. Well, I think the thing is, at the end of the day, there's been changes in government previously. Every few years, there's always a change in government. Now, how does it affect the market? Well, to be honest with you, not greatly. Life still goes on per usual. Any changes that Labor may bring in are not going to come into fruition or actually crystallise for probably 18 months anyway. So I think as far as the property market goes, it's business as usual. Now, there's been a couple of incentives that Labor want to implement, and that is the shared equity scheme. So what that entails is the government effectively buying a property with you. Now, it can't be an investment, it's for owner-occupiers only, and it's not necessarily for first home buyers. It can be for second home buyers as well, if they've been out of the market for a while and looking to get back in. So the scheme works in the fact that the government would own, it's either 30 or 40% of your property. So if you're buying, let's say, there are caps on it, but I'm going to use a nice easy figure. Let's say you buy $1 million property. Well, you're going to own $600,000 of that property, and you have to get a mortgage for that $600,000 amount, and then the government is going to pick up the other $400,000. Now, the actual limits as to how much you can spend, I don't think that they've been set, but I think that they're around $900,000 at the most in the Sydney market. I think that's where it's at the moment, and it varies from state to state. I think Queensland is around $650,000. Not that you're going to get a hell of a lot in Queensland at $650,000 at the moment, but that's the way it works. Is it going to work to help out first home buyers, and what it's going to do to the overall market? Well, I think that these sorts of schemes, homeowners grants, investment schemes, deposit schemes, have been around for a while. I don't really think that they help the market out at all. They have they're like a bit of a shot in the arm, in fact, that they get a few people into the market initially, but then what happens is they drive more demand, and unless supply is matching that demand, what's going to happen is prices increase. And that's what's just happened over the last 2 years. There's been a huge influx of cheap money coming into the market since COVID hit. And what that does is that allows people or increases demand, because it makes property more affordable for people. So when you've got a massive increase in demand and not enough supply on the market, what's going to happen? Well, your prices are going to increase. And property, like any other investment that you want to look at, any other asset, is all based around the very simple economic equation of demand versus supply. If you have an increase in the demand of your product and a decrease in the supply of that product, well, you're going to get a price increase. Inherently, you're going to get a price increase. So what happens with property is the demand increases due to these grants, shared equity schemes, loan schemes, and so forth. The demand increases, but the supply of property doesn't. So what happens again is it's just going to move the market upwards, and property is going to become more affordable. It's unfortunate that with governments, they don't see years in advance. They're only thinking about getting elected, so they come up with these short-term band-aid solutions, which has been proven over the last few years that it just does not work. So what do I think about the shared equity scheme? I don't think that that's personally going to work. There's already talk on blogs, etc., on the internet of how to effectively scam that. And I know that sounds terrible, but that is what's happening out there at the moment, because you can buy out the government's share after you've settled on the property. So what happens if you pay $1 million for the property, and then all of a sudden you get a valuation on that property for $800,000? Well, effectively the government's share of that $1 million has now gone down, and you can buy it out at a cheaper rate. So there's all these sorts of schemes, all these sorts of, I suppose, attacks that people are going to have to try and scam the government out of money. And I can just see it being another huge Labor flop like the pink bats that came out a few years ago. I don't think it's going to work. What's the real issue here with property? Well, the real issue is, and I've brushed on it already, is supply. There is just not enough supply to go round. The biggest problem that you have is from a federal and state level is, look, both sides of the government, Liberal, Labor, Greens, whatever, everybody wants to reduce the not the cost of property, but I suppose the affordability of property more than anything else. They really do. But the problem with that is that way of thinking, that mindset is not filtering down to local council, because local council actually control how much gets approved, how much is allowed to come onto the market, and the densities of certain locations. So you've got your local councillor who really doesn't care at all about the affordability of property, who's going to be in the next government. He's got his job there and he doesn't care less about any of that. He just goes through the motions every day at work. The problem that you've got with that is Australia, in our capitals, it's not dense enough. We could start building up a little bit harder, is my opinion. Okay, everybody doesn't want to live in an apartment, but an apartment is a good, cheap way of people living close to the city, close to amenities, using public transport. So the only way is up in a lot of ways. Higher densities is important. I've got to give it to Tom Tate on the Gold Coast. He certainly encouraged that in recent years, and by having a good supply of properties on the Gold Coast, of apartments and so forth, certainly it provides a cheap holiday for a lot of people, and also it brings the prices of the assets down, which is also a great help as well. The other thing is I've seen it personally myself. I've just recently bought a development in Morningside in Brisbane. Now Morningside is a location about 4 kilometres from the Brisbane CBD. There was 2 old houses sitting there on about 2,000 square metres of land. Now when I bought the site quite a few years ago, the site had no character overlay on it, or there was no restrictions on what I could do. So the feasibility was done on 10 townhouses on that particular site, 10 2-storey, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double lock-up garages, 4 kilometres from the city, so we could have housed 10 families in there. Now, the local council came in a few years ago and put a character overlay over that site. Now, the 2 old houses in the development were absolutely terrible. They were old, weatherboard, beaten up houses. One's bright green, one's bright blue. They look terrible. They've been renovated. But because and there've been so many attachments and old brickwork, etc., but because the council thought it should be character, they've made me retain those 2 houses on that site. So, and when I went in for a council meeting, I actually asked the council, has anybody been out there to have a look at these things? Have you actually seen what they're like? And of course, nobody from the council had been out there. They had no idea, but they're just ticking and flicking on their way through. What ended up going on the site is not 10 townhouses, but those 2 houses plus another 4 townhouses on top of that. So, we've cut down from 10 families being able to be in 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double lock-up garage accommodation, 4 kilometres of the city, to 6 families now. So that just gives you an idea, and that could have helped pricing, that helps supply. So that just gives you an idea of the problems that we're having within Australia at the moment from a federal, state and local level. They need to get their act together. They need to all communicate. Local councils need to get online and think, okay, we need to improve supply of property coming onto the market. Whether that's increasing density, whether that's speeding up the approval process, whether that's reducing the cost of contributions that developers have to pay to bring stock onto the market. A lot of you out there wouldn't realise that for every block of land that comes onto the market, that developer has to pay between $30,000 and $40,000 in tax to the government to be able to bring that onto the market. Okay, so there's a lot of ways that we can do, a lot of things that we as a nation could do to bring the cost of property downwards and enable people to get into the market. But as I said, it's a bureaucracy nightmare. They can't get their act together, and it's just easier to get on the internet or get on TV and say we're going to do handouts and this and that with these band-aid solutions that gets everybody voting for you. But in the end, it does nothing for the long-term problem. So look, that's my feeling towards that, and I think it's I think it's correct. Prove me if I'm wrong. I don't see any changes that anybody's having to the affordability of property. We've seen it go up by 40% in the last couple of years, which is absolutely crazy. And I think if you're a young person looking to get into the market from now, 2 years ago you might have been all right, but from now I think it's going to be reasonably difficult. And us as Australians, we're going to become more of a nation of renters. And it's through these times of huge asset growth, asset value growth, that wealthy people just get so much wealthier than everybody else. Because if I'm a person that's holding 5, 6, 7, 10 properties, while somebody else doesn't hold anything, and my asset values go up by 50%, well, that makes me just so much more wealthy than those people, which does create a divide at some stage. So look, I think that government policy needs to be addressed. Forget just straight old handouts, and I think increase supply and improve densities anyway. So guys, if you've got any comments, I'd love to hear them. Feel free to send me an email, make a comment, share the video, and if anybody's got anything to say, then I'm all ears. But thanks for having a listen to me today, and I look forward to catching up with you guys in the future. Take care then.